For a moment, it felt like the universe had leaned in and whispered a secret. Headlines spread like wildfire, carrying a single thrilling idea from screen to screen. Something hidden had finally been exposed. A distant world, a quiet contradiction, a suggestion that what we were told before might not be the whole truth. Somewhere beyond the edge of what we know, something was moving, slowly, patiently, as if it had been waiting for us to notice. And suddenly, people everywhere were asking the same question in different ways. Had someone found what others said did not exist? Or had we misunderstood the story all along? The excitement didn't begin with a telescope pointed at the sky in 2025. It began much earlier, buried deep in digital archives that had not been touched in years. Records from the past collected when computers were slower and the future felt farther away were opened again with fresh eyes. What those researchers expected to find was nothing. Empty stretches of darkness, noise, forgotten data. Instead, they noticed something that didn't quite sit still. Not a flash, not a dramatic streak, just a faint suggestion of movement, so slow it almost felt imaginary, like watching the hour hand of a clock and wondering if it was really moving at all. This wasn't a chase driven by spectacle, it was driven by patience. By the idea that if something enormous and distant existed, it wouldn't announce itself. It would drift, quietly, over decades. The only way to see it would be to compare moments in time so far apart that change itself became visible. So the researchers did exactly that. They looked back to one sky map from the early 1980s, then compared it to another made more than 20 years later. Two snapshots of the same universe, separated by a generation. Between those two moments, something appeared to have shifted, just slightly. So slightly that it could be dismissed as a mistake, or a coincidence, or dust, or noise. But when the same faint signal survived check after check, doubt turned into curiosity. The movement fit the rhythm of something far away, something cold, something massive enough to move with purpose but too distant to shine brightly. It didn't scream for attention, it whispered. From millions of points of light, only a few survived the scrutiny. Most were thrown away without hesitation. Too bright, too fast, already known, already explained. What remained was not a discovery, but a possibility. A short list of quiet suspects, each one defined not by certainty but by restraint. And among them, one stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it refused to disappear. Its location was precise. Its faint glow matched what one might expect from something ancient and cold. And most importantly, it had no history. No record of being seen before in visible light. No easy explanation. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even a claim. It was an invitation. A set of coordinates waiting for someone to look again. And this is where the story began to change. Online caution was stripped away. A filtered signal became evidence. A careful suggestion became a bold declaration. And soon, a quiet reanalysis of old data was transformed into a global headline suggesting rivalry, denial, and secrets. The idea took hold that one side had found what another had refused to see. But the sky hadn't changed. Only the story had. What existed at that moment was not a planet, not a confirmation, and not a contradiction. It was a question that survived every attempt to erase it. A slow-moving mystery hanging at the edge of the solar system, daring someone to look closer and decide whether it was real, or just another ghost hiding in the noise. As the story spread, the tension shifted from the sky to the ground. Not to observatories or control rooms, but to headlines, comment sections, and videos racing each other for attention. Somewhere along the way, a careful search turned into a dramatic standoff. One side supposedly revealing the truth, the other accused of denying it. But when you slow the story down, when you follow the trail instead of the noise, the drama begins to unravel into something far more human and far more fragile. Nothing about this search began with a secret release or a sudden breakthrough. No new eyes were turned toward the stars. No hidden telescope was unveiled. What powered the entire moment was time itself. Decades of distance between two moments of observation, quietly waiting to be compared. The data had been public all along, sitting in archives built by different nations, preserved not as trophies, but as shared memory. Anyone with patience could have looked. Someone finally did, and that patience mattered. Because when you're searching for something that barely moves, everything else becomes a distraction. The sky is crowded with illusions. Background galaxies pretending to be stars. Fleeting signals that vanish as quickly as they appear. Patterns that feel meaningful until you look at them twice. So the process became ruthless. Anything that didn't behave exactly as expected was discarded without mercy. The goal wasn't to find many answers, it was to avoid the wrong one. By the time the filtering was done, what remained was almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. A handful of locations, coordinates on a map. Not a triumph, not a claim, but a pause. Each one represented a place where something might be drifting slowly through the dark, or where chance had played a convincing trick. And the researchers said so plainly. There was no celebration in their words, only restraint, only a reminder that possibility is not proof. But outside that careful language, the meaning began to shift. The word candidate took on a life of its own. To scientists, it meant a lead, a question, a reason to keep looking. To the public, it sounded like an answer. And once that misunderstanding took root, everything else followed. A candidate became evidence. Evidence became confirmation. And confirmation, in the fastest versions of the story, became accusation. The irony is that the supposed contradiction never existed in the data. It lived entirely in the words used to describe it. One side spoke in the language of caution, drawing a clear line between seeing something once and knowing what it is. The other side, fueled by excitement and mistrust, collapsed that line entirely. If something hadn't been confirmed, it must be denied. If someone else found a hint, it must be proof. But science doesn't work on belief. It works on repetition, on seeing the same thing again and again, under different conditions, with different tools, until doubt has nowhere left to hide. A single glimpse, no matter how tempting, is never enough. The sky is too deceptive for that, and so the real moment of suspense wasn't the appearance of the candidate. It was what came after. The coordinates were released, the challenge was open. Anyone with the right instruments could now look and decide whether the signal would hold up or collapse under scrutiny. This wasn't a secret guarded by institutions. It was a test waiting to be taken. Yet online, the story hardened into sides. Narratives formed faster than evidence ever could. The idea of rivalry was more exciting than the reality of collaboration. It felt easier to believe in hidden truths than in the slow, uncomfortable discipline of uncertainty. The mystery became less about what was out there and more about who we trusted to tell us the truth. Meanwhile, the sky remained indifferent. The candidate did not care who looked first or who claimed victory. If it was real, it would move again, quietly, predictably. And if it wasn't, it would fade back into the background, another reminder of how easily we can be fooled when we want an answer too badly. The question hanging over everything wasn't whether someone was lying. It was whether patience would win over impatience. Because only one thing could resolve the tension now, and it had nothing to do with headlines. Someone would have to look again. At the edge of the solar system, certainty has never come easily. Out there, distance softens everything. Light grows weak. Movement slows to a crawl. And the line between something real and something imagined becomes thin enough to disappear if you're not careful. That's why, even now, the story remains unfinished. Not because the truth is hidden, but because it refuses to rush. Several possibilities still stand, each one quietly waiting for the same test. Maybe there truly is a distant world moving through the dark, massive enough to leave its fingerprint on the paths of smaller objects, yet cold and faint enough to evade every glance so far. If so, it won't announce itself with drama. It will reveal itself only by returning to the same place, again and again, exactly when and where it should. That kind of consistency cannot be faked, or maybe the universe is playing a subtler game. The patterns we see could be the combined pull of countless smaller bodies, their influence adding up just enough to mimic the presence of something larger. From far away, order can emerge from coincidence, and when our view is incomplete, it's easy to mistake a suggestion for a cause. There is also the uncomfortable possibility that nothing is there at all, that the signal, so carefully filtered and so tempting to believe, is simply a rare alignment of chance. Two unrelated points, separated by decades, lining up just well enough to survive every test we threw at them. The sky is vast, and even unlikely coincidences become inevitable given enough data and enough time. This is why the final step cannot be taken in theory or debate. It must happen in the open night with eyes turned upward once more. The coordinates are no longer rumors, they are invitations. Modern telescopes now stand ready, capable of seeing what older instruments could not. If something is truly moving there, it will be seen again. Its slow journey will continue, and its path will reveal itself. And if nothing appears, the mystery will quietly dissolve, leaving behind a lesson rather than a planet. This is the moment where belief gives way to discipline, where stories stop growing and answers begin to form. No matter how compelling a narrative becomes, the universe only responds to one thing: careful observation, repeated without shortcuts. There is no victory in being first, only in being right. So the real question isn't who contradicted whom or who claimed what online. The real question is whether this faint signal can survive the one test it cannot escape. Will it return? Will it move again, exactly as predicted? Or will it vanish, taking the excitement with it and leaving us with nothing but a reminder of how easily hope can outrun evidence? Until that moment arrives, everything remains suspended. Not proven, not denied, just waiting. And in that waiting, there is something profoundly human. Our need to know, our impatience with uncertainty, and our quiet willingness to look into the dark again, even when the answer might be nothing at all. So, are we any closer? Maybe not in distance, but in understanding, perhaps we are. Because sometimes the most important discovery isn't a new world at the edge of the solar system, but a clearer sense of how truth actually finds us. Slowly, carefully, and on its own terms.